What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's Nighthaunt Tactics, where we're going to be taking a look at the Mortalis Terminexus endless spell, breaking it down and seeing just why it is so popular in and among Nighthaunt armies. Alrighty guys, so welcome to today's guide. I do apologise in advance a little bit for my nasally voice this episode. I'm coming off the back end of a really horrible cold, so although I'm fine to talk and hopefully not sneeze and cough all over this voiceover, yeah, I do sound a little bit weird on the playback. But that doesn't matter because we're going to be getting into some awesome tactics. Like I said, we're going to be looking at the Mortalis Terminexus today, and we're going to do a full breakdown and just find out why this endless spell is so cool. To be doing this, we shall be covering all of the following points. We're going to do an overview of the Warscroll itself, then we're going to take a look at some pros and cons of the endless spell. We're also going to look at the most effective ways to get the most out of its abilities. We're also going to do key combinations to use alongside this endless spell. And finally, we're going to be doing an overview and my final thoughts on this endless spell. If you really like this style of guide, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more good stuff. And also let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on this endless spell. Is there anything that I may or may not have missed throughout of this guide? And if you wish to support me further, all of my social medias, links to my Patreon and my own eBay store where I sell all kinds of nice hobby goodness, new on sprue and pre-painted, will all be linked in the description below. But with that said, let's jump on in to that first point, bring up the Warscroll, and let's get a look at that overview of this spell. Okay, so the Mortalis Terminexus is a Nighthaunt endless spell. It's currently 80 points at the time of recording, which is January 2024. It's an endless spell that is summoned with a casting value of 6 and has a range of 12 inches. Only Nighthaunt wizards can attempt to summon this endless spell, and if successfully cast, you set this endless spell up wholly within range and visible to the caster, more than 1 inch away from all other models, other endless spells or invocations. It's a predatory endless spell, and this endless spell can be moved 8 inches and it flies. Predatory means that once you've cast it, this endless spell is going to be staying on the table until it is dispelled or removed by other means. And it has one ability, which is the Keeper of Mortality. After this endless spell has moved, the player who moved it can decide whether the Mortalis will reverse time or hasten time. If you choose to reverse time, heal D3 wounds allocated to each unit within 6 inches of this endless spell. And if they choose to hasten time, roll a dice for each unit within 6 inches of this endless spell, and on a 2+, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. And that is the whole of the Mortalis Terminexus Warscroll. Now that we know what the Mortalis Terminexus can do and what it's offering us, let's take a look at some pros and cons to this endless spell. First off, let's take a look at some of the pros, the good things that this spell is going to be offering us. My first point for this spell is its versatility. That Keeper of Morality, being able to either support and heal units or be a damaging spell, is absolutely awesome because in terms of when you don't need to deal any damage, you can put it in your backline and heal up, and if all of your guys are already fully healed or slain outright so there's no healing that needs to be done, you can turn it into a damage spell. So there's always going to be something for this spell to do, because if you cast it in that opening turn, you'll go on the offensive with it, and later on in the game it then has the choice to either carry on going on the offensive, or you can fall back into your own lines with this spell because of its nice 8-inch move with flying. It's just like moving any of your other sort of foot troops, so to say, in Nighthaunt with that nice speed, ability to jump over units, get it back into your backline, and then become a support spell. So having that versatility is really, really nice. Another pro to having this spell is the AoE damage or healing can really crank up the value on it. So not only does it also have that versatility bolted on where you're healing or dealing damage, but the fact that both of them have a nice 6-inch bubble off of its base means that you can really crank up the value for this spell. So if you get it right into the heart of the enemy's forces, you can be hitting sort of 3-4 units with that to deal that D3 damage. And the same goes for the healing aspect. If you've got, say, a unit with a hero nearby them, giving them that sort of bubble buff, like you have to be wholly within 12 inches of a unit, chances are you're going to be able to heal sort of a wounded thing on that unit, say if they're like Hex Race or they're Spirit Hosts, as well as tag the hero that might be going along with them. So that nice AoE bubble really cranks up the value that you can get out of this spell. My third pro for this end of spell is it has an amazing range on the turn that you cast it. We already spoke a little bit just in that previous one about the 8-inch move and fly, but when you really look at the spell as a whole, it has a casting range setup of 12 inches, it can then move 8 inches, which gives us 20 inches, and then you have that 6-inch AoE bubble built on top of it, so that gives you a total effective range of 26 inches when you first cast this spell. So again, in that opening turn, if you want to go on the offensive, you don't really need to be that far across the table, because you can throw this 26 inches across the board into the enemy's line to tag a unit. And the same goes for if you were a support hero and you wanted to use it defensively. Say that hero's on one of the flanks, you can easily cast this from one side of the table into the middle of the table, and then on the turns subsequent to that, you'll be able to keep on moving back further into your own deployment as far as you might need. So the spell, when you first cast this thing out, is absolutely great, and even once it is out, that 8-inch move and fly is not to be underrated. The last pro that I have for this spell is also it has a very decent casting value, considering that again we have that versatility and a support and spell damage with some great range. It has a really decent casting value of 6, because Nighthaunt, although we have some options in our wizard, so we've got Lady O, we've got the Guardian of Souls, we've got Reikenor, we don't really have that much access to bonuses to cast. Reikenor is the man when it comes to that. Obviously getting that either that +1 or +3 depending if he hurts himself or hurts the enemy, but just having a base of 6 and an average roll on 2d6 is 7, so more often than not even your base casters are going to be able to put this endless spell out even without receiving the buffs that we don't really get outside of Reikenor. So it's really nice to have something that's quite good at being able to cast it. And all of those pros kind of roll into each other to make this spell nice, in my opinion. You've got versatility, we've got AoE, whether we're healing or damaging, decent range, and a fairly nice casting value. So what is not to like there? Well, there are a few cons to this spell. At the moment, I'd say the first thing is it's fairly expensive at 80 points. A lot of people will judge Purple Sun on depending how expensive the Purple Sun is at the time, and a Terminexus will set you back the same amount of points. Now, although I would say that it's a con that this spell is fairly expensive, I would also say that as long as you're making the most of the AoE damage or healing buffs from this spell, again, you can really crank up that value. 80 points is not a bad points cost for this spell with the amount of work that you can get done with the spell itself. The second con that I have for this endless spell is you can hurt yourself or heal enemy units if you're not careful. When you look at the wording for Keeper of Morality, there's nothing that says you're only healing friendly units or you're only hurting enemy units. It's just units within 6 inches of this spell. Of course, you can mitigate that con by being careful, planning ahead. When you move this end of spell, you want to move it in such a way that if you're dealing damage, you're not tagging your own units, and if you're healing, that you're not tagging enemy units. As we spoke about, one of the pros to this spell is it has nice movement and it has a nice setup, so that is fairly easy to do, but at the same time in certain situations, if you've got units that are really close in combat and you can't quite fly the spell up over the top and away from the enemy and you want to be healing, just be aware of that in your mind ahead when using this spell, because the last thing you want to be doing is healing like a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon or a Maw Crusher or something like that really big and tough that the enemy's going to be thanking you for healing their own units. And the same with the damage as well. If you've got someone like Reikenor flies into the back lines and wants to throw, and someone else wants to throw this out, like your Guardian of Souls throws this into the middle of the enemy, but you set Reikenor up in such a way the turn before, you don't want to move the Terminexus in and accidentally tag your own heroes, because our heroes at only 7 wounds do not like taking D3 mortals at a time. So that's one of the cons. Just be aware that this can affect yourself in a negative way, but again, it's easy to outmaneuver that, and just make sure that that's not a problem. Just make sure you're thinking one step ahead with your Terminexus and where it's going to go. And the last con that I have for this end of spell is on the damage side of it, that it does need that 2+. So You're casting obviously the spell out, you're hoping that the enemy doesn't unbind it, and then you're needing another dice check of rolling a 2+, and again it's only a 1 in 6 chance that you're going to roll that 1, and that is for every single unit within the 6, so you're not just rolling it once, you are rolling per unit, so that again furthers the odds of you failing this completely. But it does feel bad sometimes when you sling the Terminexus across the table, roll that 1, just like lifting the veil on Lady O. It's one of those where you can't guarantee that this is going to land as soon as it's cast, not like some endless spells that just need to be cast, and then as long as they're in range of said unit they deal their effect. The healing is perfectly fine for that aspect, but the damaging side of it does have that dice check, so sometimes when that comes up it makes the spell feel rubbish. So just be aware of that when you're banking on this plan, that you have to make sure that you're passing the dice checks of casting the spell, and then also making sure that that 2+ goes off to get the damage where it needs to go. So now that we've looked at some of the pros and cons of this endless spell, I want to show you the most effective ways to get the most out of its ability, that Keeper of Morality. And again, this is just making sure that you make the most of that 6-inch bubble and when you're dealing damage and healing units. As you can see here on the desk, I have laid out some Sylvaneth units, and I've got the Mortalis Terminexus here, and I'm placing it in such a way that it goes right into the center of that blob, and I'm tagging the multiple units. So you can see the Branch Witch is being hit, we're tagging the Tree Lord, we're tagging some Dryads, and we're tagging Drycha. So we're going to hit all of those units on a 2+ for D3 mortal wounds. Whereas if I was only to place this off to the side, if I didn't get it quite in range, we might only hit something like just the Dryads. D3 mortal wounds on some Dryads is not worth of 80 points worth of the spell, but being able to hit sort of 2 characters or 3 characters with the Tree Lord there and a unit and put mortal wounds onto those multiple fronts, that is absolute value for money. So that is what you want to be looking for, and getting the most effective use out of this ability is really doubling down on that AoE and making sure you get it into the heart of these sort of enemy units. This is perfect against castle lists, so things like Cities of Sigmar, Lumineth Realm Lords, those kind of armies that are really bunched up in and amongst themselves, units buffing other units and overlapping those sort of bubbles of buffs, is where this is really going to shine. And although I'm showing you this as an example of what to hit on enemy units, you can do the same thing for your healing. So the value will really go up on this spell if you are able to tag multiple units for the healing ability. If you were just healing, say, 1 wound on a Spirit Host, that's not really that great. But if you were, say, tagging a unit of Hex Race, you were tagging a Black Coach, you were tagging like Lady O, and some Spirit Hosts at the same time, then again, you're going to be really cranking up the value and making sure you get more out of your Terminexus. With all that said and done, I also want to talk today about some key combinations that I think really ramp up this endless spell and just help take it to that next level. And the first one I want to take a look at here is the Midnight Tome, which is an artifact of power within the Nighthaunt Battle Tome. It's one of your relics of the Underworlds. It's for a wizard only, and once per battle, if the bearer attempts to cast a spell that would summon an endless spell, that spell is automatically cast with a casting of 12 that cannot be modified. You do not roll 2d6, and it cannot be unbound. So basically, the Midnight Tome will let you once per game auto cast an endless spell. It could be any endless spell, but yeah, if you're using something like the Terminexus, which is one of your more expensive spells, then this can be absolutely pivotal to get off at the right time. Again, if you're fighting something like that castle build in the early game, they're going to be all squished up together. We have that amazing 26-inch effective range. Being able to just auto cast that, throw it into the middle, hit multiple units, and really dent the enemy early on is going to be awesome, and using the Midnight Tome just makes it unstoppable. You don't need to just use this on turn 1, you could wait till sort of turn 2, turn 3, once the pressure starts getting on and the enemy knows that you've tried casting the Terminexus in those opening turns. Maybe you've hit them with it and they've dispelled it, they're thinking, oh, I don't want to be hit by that again, but you've got the Midnight Tome in your back pocket, you pop it in that middle game, you really get it to where it needs to go, and just being able to auto cast out this spell and hit all of those pros in that AoE for the reasons that we spoke about earlier is absolutely awesome. The second combination I have on the list here is with the Emerald Host subfaction. Now the Emerald Host subfaction is the one where you get to pick D3+ +1 units at the start of the game, and at the end of every round you roll a dice for those units, and on a 2+ they take D3 mortal wounds. So it's very similar to the sort of the same thing if you're using the damage side of the Mortalis Terminexus itself. The great thing about this is if, say, you go second in the battle round, say you've won you're in like a bat red, you've chose to go first, you make your opponent take the first turn, they move up, they do their things. Now it's your turn. You're going to use something, say if you use the Midnight Tome or you just cast this, you're going to throw out your Terminexus. They've got small heroes with sort of 5-6 wounds. You hit them with a Terminexus for D3 mortal wounds. Then it's going to come to the end of your turn after everything is all said and done. The Emerald Host is then going to pop off, and again you're going to be rolling, if you've picked those heroes, which you can target with the Terminexus thanks to that awesome range, then they're also going to get hit by the Emerald Host for another D3 mortal wounds on a 2+. So it gives you 2 chances to do 2 lots of D3 mortal wounds just with those 2 alone. And again, if you combine that with the Midnight Tome, it's unbindable, and the Emerald Host will just go off at the end of the battle round on that 2+ anyway. So those are 2 things that you can combo together to stop the enemy, or the enemy can't stop you, getting those mortal wounds off onto those small heroes, again as long as you are rolling that 2+, which I know that one will come up every now and then, and it happens, but it's just one of those things. But it's just a great little thing to have there. You can snipe enemy heroes out early game with these things combined together. My third list on the key combinations here is you can use this to set up Dread Scythe Harridans. This is awesome because, again, the spell is going to be going off in your hero phase. You throw it towards a unit that you want to cause wounds to, whether that be like a big monster or an enemy sort of battle line unit. You're going to hit them with the Terminexus, and again you can splash into multiple things with that AoE, and once they start taking wounds or some models die from that unit, that turn is automatically going to set up your Dread Scythe Harridans, and that is a lot safer range because you have that 26-inch range upon setup, or that 8-inch move and fly. You don't have to send something like Craven Throne Guard or charge in some Hex Wraiths to deal sort of mortal wounds on impact to then trigger the Dread Scythe getting their +1 to hit, +1 to wound on an already wounded unit. You can just use this endless spell nice and safely to be able to trigger that and then set up the Dread Scythe Harridans. Once you've hit them with the endless spell, in the combat phase you're then safe to go in and hit those bleeding targets with your now buffed up Harridans, and it's just a nice thing to have in the back pocket. Again, because it's such a versatile spell, later on, once they've set up the Harridans and the Harridans have murdered what they need to do, the spell can just float off and go and do something somewhere else for you. And one of the last combinations I want to point out today with this endless spell is that any unit that can't heal by any other means, or your allies, because a lot of the things in the Nighthaunt book will only heal or return models to summonable units, are wizards of course themselves, so like Lady O has herself built in some healing through her lifting of the veil. Other wizards like Reikenor or your Guardian of Souls can take the spell from the spell lore that will let them heal themselves and deal some mortal wounds. But there's a lot of things in this book that just physically can't heal, like the Black Coach, like Owlwitch the Drowner, like Kurdos Valentian. Heroes that you really want healed up and staying alive. Again, we're only on 7 wounds for those heroes, even less on the smaller ones, so a D3 heal to them, combined with their ethereal, combined with their ward saves, especially heroes that are hiding in amongst spirit hosts, so they're quite hard to kill anyway. Being able to put D3 wounds back onto these guys is great, and because they have no access to other ways to heal, being able to pop off the Terminexus in that fashion can be absolutely awesome. This also works, again, like we said about earlier, in the cons, because it just heals everything within 6 inches. It's not Nighthaunt keyword locked or anything like that. If you were to take some SOULBLIGHT alloys? If you were to take some SOULBLIGHT allies, say you've taken a Terrorgeist or a Zombie Dragon, something like that, then you can use the Terminexus to be able to heal up those SOULBLIGHT units, because again, everything in the Nighthaunt book otherwise that does heal is Nighthaunt keyword locked, if not Nighthaunt summonable keyword locked, but the Terminexus doesn't have that restriction. It's just a straight up heal to everything within that 6-inch bubble, so units that can't heal themselves or by any other means will absolutely love you for taking the Terminexus and healing them up. Okay, so we've had a little look over the Terminexus, what it can do, and why I think that it is a good spell, some of the good, some of the bad, and some of the things that we can use alongside this spell. And I, for one, am personally in the camp that thinks that the Mortalis Terminexus is absolutely amazing. I absolutely love its versatility, being able to be a support spell or a damaging spell, combined with that range, combined with its sort of effective casting value. I always try and find a way to write this spell into my lists. Personally, because I'm always normally bringing the Midnight Tome and I'm always using Emerald Host for like 95% of my list, so that combination alone to me is absolutely invaluable. I also like putting it into sort of teleporting lists. If you haven't seen it already, I have a list on the channel, the Curse of the Ferryman list, where I have Aulrich as a general with a Dreadblade, Lady O, and I'm just doing all kinds of teleporting ranged mortal wounds. The Terminexus Emerald Host combo plays really significantly into that, and it is won so many games on its own for me that I can't count them on 5 sets of hands. That's a lot of games. But yeah, it's a really great spell if you can get that effective use out of it, and again, combined with something like the Midnight Tome, it becomes unstoppable for that turn. It can win games on its own. And if you haven't tried this spell out, then I would really recommend that you do try and give it a go. Try and use it with some of those key combinations and make sure that you are making the most of its AoE splash, whether you are healing or using damage, to really crank up that value. And 80 points will seem like a lot for just one endless spell, but trust me, when you can really click everything together and get that value from this spell, you will feel really, really good from using it. And to those of you that have used the Mortalis Terminexus, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you like this endless spell? Are there other ways that you like to use it? And is there anything that you would offer sort of tactic-wise to everyone else and let them know how to use this spell best? I also, before I end this video, I want to give a shout out to everybody who watches, everybody who's liked, everybody who's subscribed to my channel, and a massive, massive shout out to all of the Patreon legends that are supporting me on Patreon. You guys watching these videos and helping support me in these ways is what lets me keep doing what I'm doing more often. And I love bringing this content to life for you and trying to do these the best that I can. So let me know in the comments down below as well what else you would like to see and what else I can do better to improve these guides for you. But that's it from me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. As always, stay safe. Happy wargaming.